I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. This episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast will be taking a mindful pause while sheltering in place with fellow collapsitarian and California resident Peter Melton. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast. I'm your host, Dean Spillane Walker. It is heading toward the latter end of March 2020. And as anyone who has not been living in a cave in these last few days and weeks knows, we are in the midst of a massive collapse of Earth and human systems, primarily at this moment, human systems. At least that's what's most filling our airwaves and our consciousness at the moment. We're looking at massive lockdowns, massive isolation, massive self-quarantining around the world. And as anyone who's watched this podcast knows full well, we of course have all the issues of the human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems that we've been talking about for years now, going on in the background. And somewhat impacted, we don't know yet positively or negatively how those collapse issues will be affected by this coronavirus. But, you know, what we've got here, I've noticed for myself, this is an extraordinary time to check in with fellow travelers on the path, people who have really spent some time and have some gravitas, have some sense of really having embodied the concerns, truly the existential level concerns that we've been looking at, some of us have been looking at for years. And to check in with one another, because this, to so many of us, appears to be an acceleration. Something that is far more effective than even the remarkably powerful expressions of people like Greta Thunberg and Fridays for Climate and so on, and Extinction Rebellion. There have been extraordinary expressions in the past year, and none of them come close to the complete broad sweep impact. And again, both positive and negative in our world, and the apparent acceleration of the core issues that have been involved all along with the climate situation and habitat destruction and on through the issues. I'm very pleased to be welcoming Peter Melton to today's episode of Poetry of Predicament. Peter is just a dear friend and a remarkable ally. If you don't know of him, please reach out to connect with him. We'll find out how to connect with him later in the conversation here. But what I invite you to do is to really check in, as Peter and I share, both of us, what it was like 5-6 years ago to be on the path, and the ups and downs of what it's been like to fight the battle, literally fight the battle against the willful ignorance and subtle and not so subtle layers of denial that are global, and even in the activist community. And Peter is somebody that I have always looked to be able to check in and feel like it's safe to connect with Peter. Like there's a space that he holds. He knows what it is to be pressed right up against that denial in the world and to feel disconnected from people even very dear to us. And so, he's a friend and an ally, and someone who can hold space in these massive stressors that we're facing. So, Peter, really great to have you here. Really great to connect again. And tell us about what life is like for you these days.
Yeah, good morning, Dean, and listeners. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. It has been quite a ride, almost 6 years now since we started in this new phase of really understanding that this business as usual was not working and was going to lead to some major changes in our world. Um, I'll also say happy St. Patrick's Day. I got my little St. Patrick's Day beads and my fun little hat that makes me feel European or something. I don't know. Um, I always have to try to find some silliness in what's going
Yeah,
on as my own default mechanism, gallows humor or something. I don't know,
yeah,
but these times are so interesting to say the least. And as you mentioned, it's been a spell for you and I and many others who were on the earlier waves of saying, hey, climate change is going to cause major disruption, and just noticing that the human condition barely allows folks to take that in because it's this longer term challenge and because it's easier to think it's going to happen somewhere else and not here. And we're so privileged and we're so marinated in our luxuries and our more faster worlds, and so we've been beating our heads against the wall for years, attempting to create some kind of awareness around the challenges that we already face. And now here comes this coronavirus, and most recently I've been working with Extinction Rebellion here in Santa Cruz, California, and it's been inspiring because there's other people, large groups of people. I mean, there's 500 people on the mailing list here in Santa Cruz for Extinction Rebellion who want to do something, who want to be involved. And we've done some actions and we've done some meetings, and we just had planned a climate change emergency forum that we had to cancel that was due to happen in just a couple days now. But it just felt it, and continues to feel like I have kindred spirits now. There's other folks who are getting this, even pre-coronavirus, that it was happening. It was starting to happen with Greta and other people in the climate world, and the awareness was coming around. But of course, the actions were so slow, and the government response so slow, and so still feeling like, what are we doing here? And then here comes this virus, and here we all are feeling this and noticing what's happening. And for me, when we had to cancel the event, we had Jonathan Franzen was going to speak at our event, as he lives here locally, and he wrote the article in the New Yorker. um, what if we stopped pretending that we were going to fix climate change? um, and when we had to cancel that, of course, there was this letdown because it really felt like we had a lot of following coming. But then there was this, wait a minute, what we're trying to do with this event is to wake people up to the fact that the way we're doing it is not working, has not worked for a long time, and will not work into the future. And we have to dare to get out of our comfort zones around all these luxuries that we've been living in, those of us in the privileged world, which I am definitely part of. And I said, this is exactly what we could possibly hope that the event would do, is wake people up. But now this virus has spread so quickly. And now, as of uh, midnight this morning, 9 hours ago, the county I'm in, Santa Cruz County, is in lockdown. And they've asked us to do nothing other than what is essential. And so here we are, really grappling with, oh, wow, the way we do things don't work. And we really have to change. And you're telling me I can't go get my hair cut, and now I shouldn't even really go visit my friend. And oh wait, that means this thing's closed too, and that means that job is ended too. And we are realizing in the most powerful way that we really are all connected.
Yeah.
And
You know,
it's just
Peter, if I
blowing
could,
me away.
yeah, if I could just pause you for just a second. I love the track you're on, and thank you for letting us know what it's like for you and for Santa Cruz County. It used to be my old stomping grounds. I'm a alumni of the uh, banana slug
Yes.
communion up there at UC Santa Cruz. Anyway, um, I love that last thread you were pulling on of even folks who really have been around the block in this conversation, deep activists, very engaged people. I've noticed that, that it's really why I called my book The Impossible Conversation, is it's that last membrane of resistance for so many of us that, well, there has to be enough, if we have enough solar panels, if we have enough windmills, if we have enough alternative energy, if we have a really, really cool Green New Deal, then life can look exactly like it looks now. We can have our growth economy and everything's going to be cool, and we can let go of those fossil fuels. And really, I think all of us, I don't want to try to imagine really what everybody's thinking, but it just seems pretty obvious that we all knew that is not going to happen. That one-for-one transition is not going to happen. And that even if all those pieces went into place as quickly as they could, it would be years, it would be trillions of dollars, and we would have to step down the level of productivity, the level of industrial activity to just come anywhere near the emissions targets that we're after. And that's the part that no one truly wants to talk about. Even the most close to progressive representation that we have in this country, they can't say those words because they're just the impossible words to say. So what I've been noticing about the coronavirus is that here we are blessed with this horrible blessing, but actually an extraordinary blessing as well. This is a nonpartisan, there's no human being to blame. There's certainly human beings to blame for really poor performance, but that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of having this wall of this virus presence around the world and shutting down industrial activity across the board, it doesn't matter rich or poor, it doesn't matter which privileged or not privileged countries, it's all happening and it's all coming down. And that's what we've all been resisting with all of our might. And there was no way we could cause ourselves to do it voluntarily. So it's taking care of that for us. So it's an odd blessing. So thank you for letting me just say that. I love the track you're on.
Yeah.
What else is going on for you?
Well, I think you just said it, is that, and I remember us having this conversation 3-4 years ago. It's like people aren't getting it. We don't seem to be able to get that climate change is happening the way it is. We need some perfect stepping stone. We need this big enough yet small enough emergency to wake us up so that we realize, oh wait, maybe this isn't working. And this appears to be perhaps perfect for that it does affect everyone. There is no common enemy. We really do have to all work on this together. And there's no resistance, or there's no clear resistance because of enemy to working on it together. And we're sharing information, and we're looking at countries all over the world and saying what's happening here and what's happening there, and how might we be able to help each other. And this deeper understanding that we really are connected. And maybe that's what it took, is realizing that, if I go hang out with those 500 people at that party, and then I come home and I go visit my mom, that I've now exposed my mom to those 500 people and the thousands of people that those 500 people have been in touch with. And it's like, oh my goodness, that is something as simple as germs, which so many of us just don't even want to think about, but now come full circle to, oh my God, I did touch that. And now I did touch you or myself, or put my hands to my mouth or blow my nose or whatever. And that we really are deeply connected in a physical sense, and of course deeply connected emotionally to not only ourselves and each other, but as you so well say, the earth as well, and then our soul, whatever that is for any individual.
Yeah.
So I think we're really in fascinating moments. We're in a fascinating bubble that allows the conversation, this formerly impossible conversation that is now becoming less impossible.
That's right. Whether we like it or not,
Yeah,
it's here for us.
it is. And I remember you and I talking years ago too, saying someday this is going to be what's on all the media.
Yeah.
And when that wave hits, it's going to be amazing. And now here it is.
Yeah.
I can distinctly remember this conversation many times with you. It's like, how do we prepare ourselves for that? Where there's going to be a need for so many people who can connect with people and help people be resilient. That word has now come into play so strongly that we need to be able to handle these shocks to our system, these shocks to our luxuries, our conveniences that we've been marinating in for
Yeah.
this whole party train that we've been on for the past 50 years for sure. Um, and here we are.
Yeah. I love that you were just reminding me of our earlier conversations, 3, 4 years ago and so on. I remember putting up my book in 2017, and I predicted within 2 years, it would be that kind of ubiquitous conversation. It would be everywhere. And I was off by a year. I was early by a year.
Yeah. And so here we are, those of us who have been daring to feel what collapse might be, what the system breakdown might feel like. And we've had these several years now of daring to think about it and feel ahead into it. And now here we are. And I feel you mentioned in one of your interviews recently about this, what felt almost sick and twisted feeling of like, I need to get my hit to know that this is still happening. I need the latest climate news to know that I'm still on track, that I'm still right. And I remember this from just a couple days ago, having this feeling. I was smiling. I'm like, what are you happy about? And I'm like, I was right. And
Yeah.
that's kind of sick, but it was smart of me. It was right of me. My own ego needing to feel like I wasn't such a outlier this whole time, that I was on track. And there was what felt sick, but at the same time really wise, this twisted feeling of, yeah, is wise of me to be on this track. And so there's a self-validation going on within me that says, wow, this is happening. This is clearly happening. And this is happening. Conversation that's happening around the world now is all about the coronavirus. We're still not talking about climate change.
Right.
There's this, we're talking about the footprint that showed up in the living room, right, of this monster. And we're not even talking about the monster. It's just like, oh my God, did you see the size of that footprint? Whoosh, we
Yeah.
better handle that,
Yeah.
and and of course the climate change monster, for lack of a better word, is right outside the door and already in the house. But yeah, and here we are. And here we are.
So I'm curious, Peter. Again, we come from a pretty substantial recent history of being in regular contact and checking in and how you doing, and how is this stage of being collapse aware, how's it going in your community and your life and so on. And I'm curious, how are you emotionally, psychospiritually? How's your mom? How's your community, the folks that are near and dear to you? Would you mind sharing just a little bit about how you and your people are doing? And do you have any particular ways of staying connected and staying open-hearted in the face of all this stuff?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing it in. Yeah. So first of all, I'm fine, and my mother is doing well. Shocks to the system. We were planning to go visit the new great grandchild and my sister and nieces and family. Um, so that's of course a bummer. But right behind it is, of course, we're not going to go. There's no way. Um, and just the realities sinking in. And I think that is what it's feeling like right now with me and the people closest to me. Like sometimes happens with a hurricane or something, and you're watching it on TV, and here it is percolating and brewing and gonna come and hitting the shore in some places, and some people are really interested in knowing what's happening, and other people are like, that's somewhere else, and I'm just more attuned to what's happening right here, right now with me, and everywhere in between. That I find us in a very interesting rite of passage, that we're in an individual rite of passage and a collective rite of passage at the same time. And not just collective for family and community, but collective for state, for nation, and collective for the entire globe.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to be finding myself with allergies and lots of eye watering and sneezy that are not common precursors for corona, but anyhow, those are real. But we're in this rite of passage, and we're finding ourselves awakening in a dream. Oh, and Becca said this in your other interview, the days of our lives, I thought was classic. That we've been in a daze, we've been on this party train, and there was no getting off, and now the train has stopped, and they've escorted everybody off of the train, and we're standing in a desert in Mexico, right? Just going, where am I? What do I do? Where do I get food? We're in a brand new world. There's still some comforts. It's not quite that dramatic, but there we are in this rite of passage where we're being called to look at ourselves and each other and the world in a whole new way.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody gets to deal with that in their own way. And it's taking a little time, but now, like I said, I've been pretty much self-quarantined for 10 days or so. And now the county's come down and, made it a lockdown. And so I'm touching base with people. I'm wanting to use the technology, and I'm so happy to get to have this conversation with you, Dean, because I'll get to share this too. I'm wanting to open up with more people, and that's been hard around the climate change story. I have found it really hard to open up with people. Happy to talk to strangers about it, but more of my close family and friends, there's just this feeling of, I don't want to open up about it, or I'll drop a seed and hope that maybe they respond in a way that says we can talk about this. But the coronavirus is different because we can talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and all those walls seem to be down, which have been so limiting over the years for me and for so many of us in this situation. So it's opened the door to reach out. It's opened the door to more open-hearted. Yeah, of course I have to think about you. Of course I can't come visit in North Carolina because my brother-in-law has had some heart issues in the past, and there's 3 babies under 3 in the house, right? It's like, of course we can't come out. I've been around a few people, and those people have been around hundreds of other people. So it's causing us, it's calling us to pay more attention to our fellow man and to each other. And that's what we've needed, well, pretty much forever. But this reconnection.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I I can't help but really stay on this path. I think I've shared with you a number of times that I've got this naive part of me, this kind of ridiculously childlike, innocent part of me that goes right back to hoping against hope. that things are going to turn out. Like its motto is, it doesn't have to be like this. And so I've got that voice going on. And there's another part of me that is as skeptical, as cynical as just about any other person you've ever known. You know, that obviously maybe even does more than balance out the innocent side. It usually just kind of stomps the innocent side while moving forward. And I'm left with, when I have these two kind of arguing with one another in my experience these days, I see myself one more time looking at, you know, we might just transform ourselves. This might just happen. And I can tell you this because it was about 6 months ago when Greta Thunberg was really at her peak. She was just, you know, meeting after meeting around the world. She was just pounding the truth to power. And XR was, you know, going through layer upon layer of being this extraordinary presence around the world. Just what a great organization in addition to their work. And with those two as an example of activism, I was deeply discouraged because I could just see it was, you know, all of those expressions were hitting the business as usual front and just falling away. No matter how beautiful and powerful they were, bang, they would hit and just fall away. And it was normalized into the business as usual miasma of just the swirl of who gives a shit. And that was hard. That was really stretching my ability to keep my heart open and to have any sort of real sense of worthiness of trying to put out any kind of activist energy at all. So to loop it back from there, as soon as the virus took hold, and I saw, it was really quite early on in the Hunan days, that I saw that this has the possibility of doing exactly what it seems to be doing so far, which is putting a giant chink in the denial armor. Like you've just so beautifully laid out, we have to see our interconnection around the world now. There's no way to maintain our disconnection in the privileged countries from those brown people over there that don't matter and so on. So we're going through these extraordinary layers. I'm in this kind of tentative spot of forming, you know, I'll be writing some articles and putting out quite a bit more material on this track right here. I think this is really a time to rally, where we're all raw now, and we're feeling now, and we're interconnected now, and it has our attention, and it has forced us into a vulnerable place where our underbelly is completely exposed collectively, which again, I don't think ever would have happened. We never would have been in this level of availability to the conversation without the virus. So my question is to you, and really to anyone watching this particular episode, how does this ring for you? And is there any way that you can imagine looking forward to keeping this level of raw experience, direct experience of our interconnectedness, and that deep vulnerability that has us be able to consider some other way of being? Is there anything that you're sparked to say that you could see might keep us in that mutually vulnerable state, rather than pulling it all back together as soon as we can and getting back into motion?
Right. Here's this moment that we have to preserve and prolong and keep ourselves in this vulnerable state, and attempt to nurture through it, nurture from it, nurture as it, this deeper connection. It I tend to want to jump to mental stuff when this happens. That's why I'm trying to slow down. I have my hand on my heart. It's like, because my mind just wants to say, oh, here's all these metaphors, or here's these things that I think could, if people could just remember. Um, but there's a deeper pause that's being called forth here in this rite of passage, that we woke up and we're looking around, and it's not time to fix it because the tools aren't there to fix it. It's time to just stop, just slow down and go, wow. And that there is time to slow down for a second. We've gotten so programmed into more and more, faster, faster. And now I think we really need to just pause and just be with ourselves, and then just be with each other, create the space, allow the space for us not to feel like, even right here, that we have to be, or I have to be filling this interview with what I would call wisdom or advice or something. That's just, we're in this unknown phase, and and being comfortable with the unknown is not something that we've cultivated very well, if at all, in our culture, maybe even in our species, but definitely in our culture. And here we are in this unknown pause.
Yeah.
And we take a deep breath, and then I go right. I just finished doing a Vipassana meditation right before the virus broke out. I did this Vipassana silent retreat. It's a 10-day retreat. And you say nothing for 10 days. You shut off your life. You shut off your world. You avoid eye contact. You don't know books or journals or phones. And it gave me and gives people around the world this opportunity to disconnect from the crazy, the monkey mind, and to dare to sit for hours and just be with ourselves, and this attempt to be with our breath, as many meditations are. But in this one, you're just trying to be conscious and be aware of the breath coming in, going out, coming in, going out. And of course, it's known that the monkey mind is going to take us away from that mantra, from that breath, from that awareness of the breath. And then the trick is, how do we bring ourselves back to the breath? How can I get what's often called beginner's mind? How can I get that enthusiasm of just when things get started? How easy it is to be enthused when things are started. How can I bring that back to, okay, I lost focus for a minute. I was thinking about watching my nephew play hockey, whatever, right? And then go, okay, of course I got thrown off. Everything is changed. Everything is mixed around. Practice the focus, bring it back, bring that beginner's mind, bring that enthusiasm of starting over back to the next breath, and do the next breath. That kind of, I guess I want to call it resilience. I want to call it the ability to reconnect um, with your breath, is at the core of this meditation practice, and allows you continually to go up. I messed up again. Okay, can I just be kind to myself and allow myself to recenter and take this next breath? Okay. And even in taking that next breath, or maybe you get several and you start feeling good about it, there's an underlying knowing that the mind is going to take over and knock me off course again. Okay. To the degree that I can know that's going to happen, to the degree that I know that my world is going to get disrupted in different ways over the next rest of my life, that I can recenter, and that I'll have tools like the ones you're developing and have been working so hard on these past several years. How do we recalibrate? How can I recalibrate, reset myself, line myself up to be present to this moment, because the key, as it's always been, is in this moment. What do I bring to this moment? What am I bringing to this grand experiment in this moment, so that I can best engage and connect with all of it?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'm noticing, Peter, and I thank you for bringing it today, is that pause. It's in my experience, that is such a vital crux choice for all of us, moment by moment, because the business as usual flow is seamless. It allows no pause. It is a constant, fear-driven, profit-driven, extraction-driven parade, never-ending parade of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that is demanded to keep the business as usual system running. And here we have this global pause that is really, there is no choice about it. We must pause, with all of the benefits of it, and for many, all the suffering of it. There's going to be a whole lot of people with no income, no jobs. They can't possibly financially survive 2 weeks of I keep wanting to call it incarceration.
Isolation.
Okay, yeah, it's isolation. There's another word that I am forgetting more often than I'm remembering these days. But in any case, I appreciate the pause, especially that you're bringing to this conversation. And we absolutely must tap into, each of us individually and then collectively, the inner wisdom that is available to be tapped into if we were to take the time to pause in the way that you're describing. So I really appreciate you bringing that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I'm needing it for myself.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to want to jump back on, to want to go, to want to fix, to want to fix. It's so human of us, and it really takes something as big as this to jar us off course, to allow us to see things from another perspective, and then be tested again. Can I pause? Because right after pausing, it's like, okay, I paused. Let's go, Dean. That was my pause.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And at the same time, this conversation has been so long in coming that thinking that it's going to be heard has been so long in coming that there's an excitement around getting to be this deep and this fresh. And I know, you do that with your Safe Circle calls on the Tuesday nights that have been beautiful, to give people a chance to just know they could be on a call and be heard.
Yeah.
And here we are. And this rite of passage is calling up different things for different people, as rites of passage will do. And so my invitation is for folks to dare to step into, what's my rite of passage about?
Mm-hmm.
And I, as a big thinker, I like to think as big as possible, to help me find framing for things. That I would invite people to ask the question of who do you think you are, and what do you think you're doing? You know, what is real for you regarding what's grander than your humanity? How did this all come to be? What's the story that's being played out on this grand level? That we're in between stories, as a lot of people are saying now, that we've played out this business as usual growth, consumerism, consumption story,
Mhm.
and we're realizing that story doesn't work anymore, and we're reaching for a new story on the bookshelf, but we don't know if it's even there. And again, we're in this pause, and we can't just go to the next story. We can't just everybody decide to ride the bus and the situation solved. You know, that
Mhm.
we can't just do that. So we're in this moment where we're being called to create that new story for ourselves and for the collective, to be that creativity, to be that love, to be that humanity that, even in each of our own little ways, is adding to the story, is co-authoring the story of what we are becoming individually, as a community, as a nation, as a globe, as a humanity.
Mhm.
Not just within humanity, because this is all asking us, of course, to look at how we treat our fellow planet mates as well. um, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother barrel of monkeys, if you pardon the pun.
Yeah.
But here we are. Here we are. And and can we pause long enough to connect to that infinite spirit, to that spirit me, or God me, or whatever helps you connect to whatever you think is beyond you, to say, okay, what's the story? You know, I'll never forget this. When I first got wind of how bad the climate situation could be, I was feeling, oh my God, my nieces and nephews, this younger generation, they're not going to get to play the way I got to play. I lived through a really great time in human history, and we really got to do it up. And then I thought, oh wait, it was that playing that was thrashing the planet. It was that mentality that was literally thrashing the planet. And so we can't allow the next generation to do it the way that we did it.
Yeah.
And that was very confusing, because there's no other story to plug in, except for me, except for then what came was, well, are you a spiritual being having a human experience? As is so easy to claim when you're waxing philosophical. You know, it's like, what does that mean? What does spirit mean? What is this spiritual energy, this infinite life, love, consciousness energy? What does this have to say to the world now, if in fact humanity is causing things to run amok? What is that to the infinite spirit
Yeah.
realm? And that's the big question to ask yourself.
Yeah. I, you know, I've been involved with various spiritual practices for since I was quite young, and I've had a really short um, patience, a small amount of patience for kind of new agey aphorisms that we're all supposed to just put up on our mirror in the bathroom, and it'll somehow transform our life. And I think one part that is kind of cracking through that kind of surface level of aphorisms that I find annoying is it seems like there's some very human ways in which we collectively need to see ourselves, and can now see ourselves quite clearly, in terms of choosing the way that we've been going up till now, or choosing a different way that involves more connection with deeper self, others, earth, and soul. And I'm talking about really very, very clear, pragmatic examples. Nothing woo-woo about it. Like when I look at, we've gotten ourselves a president and the Republican Party, but really right behind it, the deeply foul political system that includes most Democrats and so on. And that got us right up to a place where just recently, within the past couple of days, the president was saying he didn't want to bring in people from a cruise ship into Northern California, into the docks in Oakland, because it would make his numbers go up, the numbers of infected people in America, and would make would damage his ability to then get reelected. More or less, that was the short version of what he was concerned about. And he said those words right there into the cameras. And so we can now see ourselves that that's what we've chosen, and that's who we are at some level. And we get to, all of us, whether we like him or not, he's a part of our expression. And we get to crystal clear see that we're calling on, and life is calling for, an entirely different framing of how we relate with one another, and how completely inept that system, with him and the Republicans and so on at the helm, how completely inept that system is for any sort of sober, clear, and good moving forward with life. I'm asserting that there's a huge amount, no matter what political tribe one finds themselves in, that there's something so completely bold and unavoidable about that message of shadow that we are now really compelled to see. So if not this, then what? I think there's a calling for people to let down the tribalism, let down the polarity, and to really soften their view and look over and see there's a person over there.
Yeah, and that person is me, right? That we are that. And well, so well said right there, Dean, that the rite of passage is calling forth the shadow, that we wouldn't see it otherwise, right? That we would so easily stay in our default mode. And so is it possible that whatever is helping us in this world, whatever dynamic consciousness, love, infinity, spirit is doing, is bringing this shadow to us so that we can experience this vulnerability you speak of, be in this pause that says, oh my goodness, we've done this, we've all done this. And it's just way too easy to point at somebody and say, you're the bad guy. And we've been doing that forever. And maybe it's time we wake up, and this coronavirus doesn't have the bad guy specific, although it is the next step to want to call Trump the bad guy for whatever reason you might want to, or whoever you want to call the bad guy, not just Trump, the Democrats for doing whatever the Democrats have done too. And that can we pause enough? Can we awaken enough to this rite of passage to see that this is in fact a gift? This is in fact, although it doesn't look like a gift, is probably not the word that most people can take in here, but it's an exercise, it's an experience that is needed in our shaping, in our sharpening of the saw, in the awakening of our soul to be present and to have empathy for everything. Empathy, you can start with yourself, to just be forgiving, be empathetic of myself, that I'm in a whole new world, and these are challenging times, and I'm doing the best that I can. And so that's also true for my family members who I may or may not agree with, for my neighbors who I may or may not agree with, for politics I may or may not agree with. Can have empathy for the entire species. We are this young and naive species that is been given this puzzle. We're a 5-year-old that you give a 1,000-piece puzzle to. and expect them to try to figure it out. And we're in that moment going, I don't even know where to start. I guess I
Yeah.
should look for an edge. That's about where we're at. And and so to have empathy for that and to take on that this is part of my rite of passage
Mhm.
is to be forgiving and empathetic for my entire species.
Yeah.
Just that.
That's all.
Come on, it's Tuesday. You can do it.
Let's get on with
You
this
know,
thing. What's the deal?
put on your cowboy hat. I got my St. Patrick's cowboy hat. Put on the cowboy hat. Woohoo! Get her done. We can do this. Sheesh, we were getting too deep. I had to go.
Yeah.
I had to go zany on myself there.
All right. All right.
Uh,
Well, Peter,
gotta have.
I can feel our envelope of time closing up, and it's always good to connect with you. And I certainly had no clue when or if there would be a threshold like this that we could talk about, that we could share about, we could connect about. But here it is. And it has been a real pleasure to confirm you're okay and your people are okay. And you're on what seems like a really good and wholesome track, and get some practices in place for self-regulation and co-regulation. And that's so great. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, there's an awful lot of folks that are new to this conversation that you and I have been circling the block for a few years in. And I'm wondering if you have any last messages that you'd like to convey to either folks that have been around the block a few times, but also are kind of getting worn out or newly worn out, because this is one incredible wave that we're in, or people that are new. They're wondering, like, WTF, like, what is this thing? You have any words to sign off with them?
Yeah, it comes back to me that we've got to pause. We've got to realize that we're in a rite of passage. That's someplace we've never been before, and it's calling forth, who do you think you are? And that's this deeper, for me, spiritual daring to jump out of Peter thinking he's Peter, and asking the universe quite simply, hello universe, what's going on? And dare to hear what comes back and trust what comes back, that you can connect because you are connected. We are all one. And the metaphor that I think is easiest as you begin this process is the ocean and the wave. And I like to share this every time, is that we are waves on the ocean that have forgotten that we are also the ocean. And here's this individual wave going, what's going on here?
Mhm.
What? And looks back at the other wave and says, why are you following me? Why are you chasing me? Right? We set up the game. And my deepest understanding, we set up this game somehow as infinite life, that we would forget that we were connected to everything, that we were in fact the ocean expressing. We would forget that until a moment when we could awaken and realize that. And it may take death, because when the wave dies, it merges back with the ocean and it remembers and it laughs, right? And we're at this moment where we're a wave, but we're awakening to the fact that we're so much more than that. We are, in fact, all of life, infinite love consciousness expressing in this unique way I call Peter or Dean or whoever you are today listening. And if we can tap into that deep knowing of who we really are, then that gives us a chance to realize that our fellow man is just doing the best that he can too. And you can tap into that empathy. And with those tools, you can begin to regulate yourself in these times where things get shaky, and know that there's so much more going on than what we've ever thought, most of us. And we can tap into that knowing that we are all of life happening. And this has always been a temporary game. And here we are awakening to that, and then adding our love energy into the experiment, into the soup of what's happening. That love has got to play a key part in this overall process, this rite of passage that we're in. and we don't know how it turns out. We get to let go of that expectation of how it's going to turn out, and have this empathy and empathy and accepting of ourselves and each other as we dare to be ourselves amidst this ever-changing world.
Yeah.
Whew.
Well, there you go.
And there you go. And we're on to the next breath, right?
Yes.
And on to the next refocusing as you step into whatever's next in your day. And Dean, thank you so much for all that you've done, and for our journey together, and for having me on your show, and for daring to continue to share your love in the way that it moves through Dean.
Yeah.
And awesome. Really.
All right. Well, Peter, I hope against hope that we get to see you on the occasional Safe Circle call, which of course is the first, third, and fifth Tuesday evenings of every month. And we've got a new offering coming up of the community of practice, which is going to be a couple of Saturdays each month, in which we will all be sharing what practices of reconnection we each have chosen in these times, and work those and share those together over the months to come. No matter how all of that goes, I look forward to our next time of checking in, and I hope that it's a time of free travel and health and abundance around us all, because I want to come down to Santa Cruz and see you, and have some of my very favorite croissants in the world down in downtown Santa Cruz there, and just see some of my old stomping grounds. I so love being down there. And Peter, for your heart and your focus and your intention, your presence, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you to each of you on your journeys. And blessings. Send my blessings to Ashlyn. I got to get back up there to see all my beautiful connection peeps up there. And share your love. Be the love first.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our now weekly support gatherings online that we call Safe Circle